Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Mariam Sub. Well, only a matter of hours apart, Anthony Albanese and Peter Dutton have both reached the same conclusion. Australia needs to own the strategic Port of Darwin. Its lease has been controlled by a Chinese company for a decade, but for different reasons, the two leaders now believe that it must be taken out of Beijing's hands and become government-owned if necessary. Here's political correspondent Greg Jennett.
Okay, ready?
In the wrong hands, almost anything can be weaponised. The consequences,
Got him.
if it all goes wrong, casualties that could have been avoided. Before the Sharon shelling, Peter Dutton's top-end tour was aimed at putting back in Australian hands an asset held by China for a decade.
We'll move immediately to secure the Darwin port. We need to make sure that we recognise the times in which we live.
In Queensland's Sodden Centre,
If you stick to this country in the dry, it'll stick to you in the wet.
Anthony Albanese had gone to meet flooded farmers Mardo, Beck, Cooper and Jacob.
Determined to build back, and it's important that Australia supports them.
Recovery payments and a joint fund with the state to fix broken fences are on offer.
Unreal, isn't it, eh?
Unbelievable.
Although landlocked, he too ended up in the same policy place as his opponent, on the Port of Darwin.
We have a clear view, which is that it should be in Australian hands.
Used by American forces and the warships of other friendly nations, the leasehold sale of the port to the Chinese-owned land bridge has been a bugbear to the US and others for a decade. At the time, coalition and country Liberal governments were in place in Canberra and Darwin.
It's clear that a mistake was made many years ago.
This is the guy who sold it.
Now, both sides of politics want it back in Australian private ownership, and if not,
If need be, we will purchase as well.
If we need to introduce further legislation, then we will do that to achieve this outcome.
no one's talking publicly about price. One's spoken privately to the Chinese.
We had contact yesterday with the Chinese ambassador.
He's obviously got better connections with the Chinese ambassador. It's a very strange thing for him to say.
Anthony Albanese insists the government's told the port's current owners of its intentions. Landbridge not only disputes that, we haven't had any discussions with the federal government or the NT government, it maintains, adding the port is not for sale. On their journey to the same destination of Australian ownership, the government and opposition come from different stated directions. Anthony Albanese suggests economic resilience is a key factor. Peter Dutton highlights the risk of Chinese sabotage or surveillance on the port. Either way, the careful diplomacy with Beijing could now become bruising. Greg Jennett, ABC News, Canberra.
Global stock markets have tumbled again after China hit back at tariffs announced by US President Donald Trump. Customs agents at American seaports, airports and customs warehouses have today begun collecting levies on imports as fears mount of an all-out trade war.
A brutal end to a punishing week.
We have a market that is throwing a temper tantrum.
All major indices spiralling. The Dow Jones Industrial Average down another 5.5%. The S&P 500 nearly 6%, while the tech-heavy Nasdaq is in bear territory after falling more than 20% from its recent high. The escalating global trade war, the catalyst. China bent on a 34% tariff on American imports in retaliation for those the US president announced this week.
The market is pricing in an economic Armageddon.
Donald Trump taking to social media to attack Beijing's decision, claiming China played it wrong and panicked. The head of the US central bank says the concern is warranted and that the global trade war will push up prices.
It is now becoming clear that tariff increases will be significantly larger than expected.
Some of the fencing has been damaged.
Prime Minister Anthony Albanese hitting the phone, talking to his British counterpart as they work towards a coordinated to what's looking like a global crisis.
Despite the major market sell-offs and warnings of an increased risk of recession, Donald Trump does not appear to be backing down. But pressure will build as Americans start feeling the pinch of increased prices.
His political opponents taking aim.
This week, Donald Trump made one of the dumbest as president, and that is saying a whole lot.
After the battering of this week, investors are nervously waiting to see whether the US president has a change of heart. Carrington Clark, ABC News, Washington.
Notorious underworld figure Tony Mockbell has marked his first day of freedom after being released on bail yesterday. Mockbell is appealing to overturn his conviction after his lawyer was found to be a police informant.
After almost 2 decades behind bars, Tony Mockbell was keen to stretch his legs. Taking a walk through a park with his family, media pack in tow.
How does it feel? How was your walk this morning? You seem quite cheery.
The underworld figure seemingly enjoying his first morning of freedom as he fights to overturn his convictions.
You know I've got proceedings on foot and I can't talk to anyone, so please, thank you.
Tony Mockbell was released on bail yesterday while he appeals. The court was scathing of his former lawyer Nicola Gobbo, who secretly passed information on him to police, with senior judges saying he has a very strong case. He's been set a list of 30 bail conditions, including not using a smartphone, checking in with police each day, and wearing an electronic monitoring device. He saw out his day with some retail therapy.
Those first few days are going to be almost surreal, I imagine, after being incarcerated for so long. So some people may be drawn to shopping centres, other people may be drawn to beaches or other outdoor areas. So it really, I guess, depends on what that individual has been craving and missing.
Tony Mockbell will remain living at his sister's home here in Viewbank while fighting to quash his convictions. And while yesterday's decision was a significant victory, a win at his upcoming appeal will make him an entirely free man. If he's successful in court, experts say it would be a seismic outcome.
If those charges are quashed in relation to the cases associated with Nicola Gobbo, this is sending shockwaves through the entire criminal justice system in Victoria.
And there could be more cases to follow. Leanne Wong, ABC News, Melbourne.
Security has been ramped up at AFL games in the wake of this week's firearms breach at the MCG. Some fans have been kept waiting well into the first quarter of this afternoon's clash between Richmond and the Brisbane Lions. Authorities are reviewing procedures at major events following the failure by staff to detect the weapons.
Thank you for your patience as you make your way into the ground.
Long lines and lengthy delays for some fans heading into the MCG for this afternoon's Tigers clash against the Brisbane Lions. Security tightened for the first game at the stadium since Thursday night's scare.
Shocked, really shocked. Something terrible really could have happened. My scarf will go off because of the badges and I get patted down in my bag, like, you know, my huge bag gets checked. So how they got in with firearms is beyond me.
The MCC, Victoria Police and the AFL reviewing procedures after police allegedly found guns on 2 men inside the ground during Collingwood's clash with Carlton. The MCC blaming human error for the frightening breach, saying there had been a breakdown in the manual screening process, even after automated screening units identified items of concern.
Maybe this is a wake-up call for the security companies to make sure that they're doing their job properly.
It's not good for the game.
South Australian authorities also reviewing security for next week's gather round, with 18 sides meeting in Adelaide.
You can't discount risk, and that's exactly why SAPOL will be beefing up security as they do every year.
Police say Thursday's alleged breach was an isolated incident and is not being investigated for terrorism. But with a system this vulnerable, questions are being asked about what it could mean for future crowd safety at major events.
We don't want families getting a message that if they come to the football, there's going to be people here that are carrying any weapon, specifically loaded firearms, into the MCG.
The MCG and our sporting events are not any place for weapons. It's a very clear message, and Victoria Police are working very hard to make sure that they have a presence at these sporting events into the future.
Punters were just keen to see the action.
Because it's going to take a long time and I want to watch the game.
A sentiment shared by many. Sasha Payne, ABC News, Melbourne.
Big superannuation funds could face fines and class actions over a cyber breach which led to 4 members of one super fund losing $500,000 combined. It's led to questions over whether funds have properly protected members' accounts.
Members of some of the country's biggest superannuation funds are still struggling to access their accounts after a suspected cyber breach. 4 Australian super members have lost $500,000 combined. The fund says it's working with those members but won't say whether they'll get their money back.
There would be some liability on the superannuation firm to ensure that their members' accounts were protected. So I think it's just a bit early to get down that path.
With only those of retirement age able to access funds, it's likely to be over 60-year-olds who've been victims of the attack. The ABC has heard from members who are angry and confused about what's happening with their retirement savings, and they've raised questions over whether their accounts were properly protected. Australian Super says it has an ongoing program for improving cybersecurity, and it has a 2-factor authentication process for a number of interactions. Some are required, others are opt-in.
It would make a lot more sense for multi-factor authentication to be the norm as opposed to an opt-in.
While it will take time to investigate what's happened, like Medibank and Optus, the super funds could face class actions or fines in the wake of the security breach.
Financial services is one of the most highly regulated sectors in Australia, and there are heavy fines for breaches of their different obligations.
Super funds responsible for trillions of dollars are being warned to remain vigilant to increasing cyber attacks. Fiona Blackwood, ABC News.
Ukrainian officials say a Russian missile strike killed at least 18 people, 9 of them children, in the city of Kryvyi Rih. More than 50 others were wounded, among them a 3-month-old baby. Officials say the missile hit a residential area and children were killed at or near a playground. They say the city was later targeted by drones. The attack on President Volodymyr Zelensky's home city is one of the deadliest by Russia this year. Moscow says it struck a military gathering, a claim Ukraine has denounced as misinformation. A federal judge in the United States has ruled that the Trump administration must return a father who was wrongly deported to El Salvador. Kilmar Abrego Garcia, whose wife and children are US citizens, was sent to a notorious mega prison in El Salvador, despite a court order that was supposed to protect him from deportation.
A family torn apart by a government mistake.
In a blink of an eye, our 3 children lost their father, and I lost the love of my life.
Last month, after